But how we regulate that stress response is everything, man. If we're in a high demand situation and we can't get our bodies to react with a high stress response, we're not going to perform. And if we're in a low demand situation and we stay in a high stress response, we're going to burn out. And so regulating that autonomic nervous system, that's the key. And when we're in a stress response, the connective tissue actually stiffens to be able to prepare to run or to lift something heavy. And that's a good thing, right? That tightness allows us to improve our mechanics and to, be able to perform explosive activities or be able to take advantage of efficiencies with endurance athletics.
We believe that you are strong by design, and you were made in God's image to have a strong body, mind, and spirit. You're listening to the #1 strength and health authority podcast in the world. So let's get ready to unlock your potential and transform your life in today's episode. Hello there, and welcome to another episode here on the Strong by Design podcast. Your host today, Coach Chris Wilson, with yet another terrific guest and a really fun topic. Actually, it's kind of a series of different topics that are all in the wheelhouse of our guest today. And I must admit, I'm a bit selfish because these are questions or topics, I should say, that I just love digging into myself. So I am as much benefiting from the information and the conversation with our guest today as all of you great listeners out there. So get ready, get your notepads out, because this is going to be a lot of fun, and I'm really looking forward to it. Before I introduce today's very special guest, I would like to take a moment of gratitude just to say thank you so much for following the Strong by Design podcast. We're deep now into 2022. Every single week, we release a new episode that's somehow connected to, helping you in body and mind and spirit. There's really nothing that we're not willing to tackle. No topic is off the table for us if it has to do with getting stronger in your life, living life strong by design. And so I am so grateful for all of our wonderful return listeners that we've had now for 4 years, coming into our 5th season here soon. And if you're a new listener to the podcast, well, welcome. So happy to have you. Hope today's podcast, being your first, is a really good one for you, and you enjoy it, and you come back. And there are over 200 episodes for you to go back and listen to. Tremendous guests over the years, and we're not stopping anytime soon. We release a podcast every single week. Sometimes we even do bonus episodes in between. So thanks again for that. And if I forget to say it at the end, be sure to hit that 5 stars and share this episode with someone who could benefit from it. That's the only way this podcast really grows is from word of mouth, is from sharing, is from people leaving a review. Kind of those natural, organic things that people just want to do when they hear a really good topic or conversation. They want to, let other people know about it. So that really means a lot to us. We really appreciate that. So our guest today, Mr. Douglas Bertram, goes by Doug as far as I can tell, so we can keep it a little bit less formal today. He is a peak performance expert. His resume is phenomenal, really. He's founder of the Structural Elements platform. He has 27 years of clinical experience treating patients with his proprietary combination of Chinese medicine and manual therapy. That sounds impressive just saying it, right? So, but what does that mean, okay? Well, he's an educator, he's a public speaker and entrepreneur, and his education is very much in the field of physiology, psychology, biomechanics, like how the body moves and functions, operates, and how to get the most out of our body, how to achieve peak levels of performance, regardless of what you do in your life. He's completed dozens of marathons, 50 and 100 mile ultra marathons, and 3 Ironmans. This is how I want to start the conversation, by the way, is finding out a little bit more about his own personal history doing these endurance type events, because I am absolutely fascinated by people who can do this, and we'll get there. We'll get there. And so his career is devoted to human performance in work, life, and sport. So, Doug, welcome to the Strong by Design podcast. So happy to have you today and to dive into some of this fun material. Yeah,
man. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to a healthy chat here.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, healthy to say the least, right? We're going to be. It'll be a healthy conversation based on a lot of good, healthy stuff.
Exactly.
So, all right. So number one, just talk a little bit about who you are, what you're doing. What brought you to this point? What kind of got you rolling? At what point in your life, maybe when you were younger, did this become kind of your passion or your ambition in life?
Yeah, I mean, it's real simple. I grew up as a soccer player, and I basically lived for the sport. And when I was a freshman in high school, I fractured my wrist very traumatically in the very first game of the season. And I had a pretty negative experience with my orthopedic surgeon. He credited himself for saving the fingers, but didn't, set an expectation for me that I shouldn't expect a lot of function out of that hand or that arm because of the fracture. And I was a goalkeeper, man. That's like what I lived for. And so my next experience was with an occupational therapist that just said, look, man, like don't buy into any of that. The beauty of the human body is that it has the intrinsic ability to heal given the right set of conditions. And I was back to starting goalkeeper the next year, right? So for me, it was like, wow. From a very early age, I just really invested in the body's intrinsic wisdom and ability to perform. And so I've been on a lifelong pursuit of understanding how to maximize, the relationship with the body to be able to allow it to express what it's capable of doing.
Wow. And often in life, don't we find that it takes a personal experience to really kind of drive us forward in something, to really, get our, to get us angry, right? Or to get us frustrated, or to get, it's something that is like compels us to do something, to be able to find out like, no, there's got to be a better way.
Yeah, our drive and our motivation, I think, comes from all of our experiences, right? And it kind of shapes us, and we then develop a thesis that we chase, and to try to be effective and again, performance and work life and sport, right? That's my goal for everybody, but it's also my goal for myself, right? So how do I fuse those things together to find meaning and develop a legacy that I'm proud of, and that's what it's all about.
Now, I know soccer players run a lot, okay? Now, I did a little bit of soccer, about that much, when I was a little guy, and I remember eating all the orange slices after like in between halftime and stuff. I remember oranges. I remember kicking a ball and eating a lot of oranges. That's all I remember. But then I got into football kind of all through high school and stuff. So I was always into weights and football, but I always look off and see the soccer players running. Constantly running up hills, around the field, like doing all that stuff. So I imagine, obviously, you had some ability in your running as a soccer player. But what takes you from a goalie to a long distance, like to a marathon runner or ultra marathon runner, which is like 50 to 100 mile type runs, which is unfathomable for most people. Like, I worked with a guy named Phil. I forget Phil's last name. He's such a cool guy. And I remember him blowing my mind when I was in my early 20s. He told me, yeah, I love to run. I do a lot of running events. I'm like, oh, really? You do like marathons? And he's like, well, yeah, I've done marathons, but I like to do ultra marathons. I'm like, ultra? What? I've never heard of that before. What's that? He's like, I'll run. I do 50-mile runs. I'm like, 50? I didn't know they did. I didn't know they allowed that. This is, So like, just tell people like what takes you or what gets you to compete at that kind of level and that kind of preparation and that kind of endurance?
The reason that I was a goalie is because I was terrible at running, right? I had asthma as a kid, and I didn't like to run. I liked to stop balls with my face. It was ultimately I was willing to just throw myself in front of anything, which is what made me a good goalkeeper. But the running wasn't really my strong suit, Then in high school, I got into like sprinting, I got into track. I was always big into weightlifting for strength and vanity and stuff like that. And I was a pretty powerful kid, and got into track and was a sprinter. But man, I looked at the 400 as an endurance event, right? I mean, for me, it was like 1 in 200. that was it, And so getting into distance running was about the least likely, thing for me to end up in. But ultimately, it was kind of a two-part process. One is that I have a love for biomechanics. And I read this book called Chi Running, and it just made like a bunch of sense to me that ultimately that running is a lot of technique. And most people just think you're either built to run or you're not built to run. And people are like, oh, I'm no good at running. I can't run. And people just expect to go out and be good at it. But there's a lot of technique and a lot of finding balance that's critical to being efficient. And so as an inefficient runner, it became something that I was like, I want to figure out how to like find the zone here, So that was part of the motivation is I wasn't good at it. The other thing that just kind of hit me was I was in a really kind of nasty car accident when I was in grad school, and it hurt to walk, let alone run. And I kind of got fed up with it and decided, you know what, like I'm not going to live my life in pain. I'm too young to be compromised, and I'm going to figure this out. So I read this Chi running book. I went out of my condo and I ran like a mile, and it was painful and it was not pretty. But I got back home and I wasn't dead. And so I said, hey, if I can run a mile, right, I can build on this. Yeah. So I signed up for a marathon. And I just, from a 1 mile base, I said, let's just see how far I can go. And fast forward, I completed the marathon, and I said, well, okay, apparently 26.2 isn't as far as I could go. So I signed up for a 50K and did a 50K, and that led to a 50 miler and to a 100 miler and, to Ironmans and all kinds of stuff. And it's not because I've never been fast. Let me just start off by saying that. I've never been competitive at any of these distances, right? I'm lucky to participate, but I'm certainly not, I don't have a bunch of medals or trophies on my shelf anywhere. I've maybe have an uncanny ability to endure suffering and discomfort, but man, it's amazing what the body's capable of doing with the right set of circumstances. And yeah, this might surprise a lot of the listeners, but the number one factor in being able to accomplish any sort of endurance success is relaxation. And that might surprise people, but when you have the anxiety,
I was going to say, it sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it?
But when you have the anxiety of like, oh man, this is tough, and I have to do this for 87 more miles, guess what? You're going to freak out, and you're not going to be able to do it. But when you can be present and in the moment, and you can keep finding a place where like, okay, this is getting hard, relax, just settle in. Okay, this is getting hard, relax, just settle in. I mean, that's ultimately the exercise is the training is between the ears as much as it is anywhere else, man.
Oh man, big time. You know what? Just to add a little humor to that, I thought maybe what you were going with before you let the cat out of the bag with relaxation, I thought you were going to say Band-Aids over the nipples.
Oh, that's key.
Because I know how important that. I mean, that's maybe second, right? Relax and like protect the nipples.
I got interviewed one time, and it was like, "How did you prepare for this race?" And I just lifted up my shirt and showed my nipple Band-Aids, and I was like, "That's basically about as much as I've done here." And one other just kind of funny story, man. My PR marathon was the New York City Marathon, and we had gotten in. I was working for a company that joined via charity, And so, we all had to wear these shirts, and they were not my normal training shirt. It was kind of a less expensive tech top that we got through this charity. And so my finishing photo of like my all-time fastest marathon is me with like my arms in the air, just like, blood streaking down my chest, So
Yes.
it was like, that's not going to make the wall for sure. But yeah, it's an important factor for sure.
Well, people who have never done any kind of long distance running, a 3K, a 5K, even a 10K, may not require it depending on, the person. But if you've done anything, even, a half marathon or longer, or some type of all day endurance event, protecting, it sounds silly, right? But a lot of times what people are wearing is they're wearing something that's like a dry fit type thing, right? Or something that's kind of nylon or spandexy. And what happens is that can move up and down on your body's surfaces, namely your nipples. And if you're not covering those things and you got a whole day of material just moving and shifting, you got some chafing going on, so
people don't really think about just, with endurance athletics, you've got increased exposure time, right? So a lot of the learning curve is like, how do I eat while I'm running? How do I prevent chafe in my thighs and my nipples? How do I carry water with me when I train? How, all these things are learning curve stuff, and the people that are good at it, it's just from time in the saddle and learning from the seasoned vets,
No doubt about it. No, I love finding out about stuff like that, and it's I think it's always very interesting conversation when you meet somebody that can do pretty crazy endurance competition of all kinds. There's lots of different things, right? There's mud runs and adventure races and ultra marathon, and bike related stuff and just any of these outdoor or eco type challenges of any kind are so cool. And I encourage anyone listening, if you've never done anything like this, any of these, they have a lot of starter beginner type ones that are very short distances, are just good starter, like try it. Give it a try. It's so good in life for everyone to compete at some level, no matter their age or their gender or their physical ability. Go do something, even if it's a walk-related thing or a hike or a trail thing. It's so fun and so good for you.
Well, again, I go back to, I got into all this stuff injured, right, and unable to run a mile, right? So, the beauty of it is that, people think, oh, I can never do that. Well, you can't if you don't get out and start. Right. So, whether it's running and walking around the block, maybe you start off by, hey, I'm going to walk for 30 seconds. I'm going to run for 5 seconds. Well, guess what? You just started and now you can build on that. Right. And the body requires adaptation. It's you train the tissues of the body and you learn the technique of how to get more efficient, but you can't do it thinking about it. You got to do it by starting. And then from there, one of the things that we in our business and my practice and kind of my field of study and everything else is I've had a fascination with connective tissue, more so than really focusing on building muscle or even I pay a lot of attention to the alignment of the bones, but only because of how it relates to the connective tissue. But the connective tissue, the fascia, that separates, one muscle from its neighbor and kind of surrounds all of the organs and connects to the bone and is continuous underneath our skin. This has been kind of my primary, point of entry with looking at how the body can adapt to be able to do these crazy things. And, you can train your muscles, yes, but you have to train your fascia. You have to train the connective tissue. And if you go too fast, guess what? You're gonna run into inflammation and you're gonna run into injury and you're gonna get shut down. And if you don't stress yourself, you're never going to adapt. You're never going to get stronger. You're never going to improve. So, it's a simple formula. It's work plus rest, equals fitness, right? And you have to put in the effort, and then you have to recover, and then you have to put in another effort, and you have to recover. And if you do that, it's formulaic, right? You do the right things countered with the right recovery, and the body will continue to get stronger.
The body is an adaptation machine, and it can get good at just about anything that you throw at it, given time and given, like you said, that work-rest ratio, where it's kind of systematic and structured and planned out. People don't just get good at something by luck most times. Certainly there's outliers, right? But most people, it's the 10,000 hour rule, right? It's like they had to really drill themselves and find a rhythm and you don't just get good at piano because you sat down a few times. Like you played piano several hours a day for several weeks for several years, and now you're like an amazing pianist. Right. It didn't just happen. Like you got to put the work in, and people nowadays, unfortunately, want the quick fixes. Don't want to put the work in, but if you want anything truly good and to truly feel the sense of accomplishment at something in your life, the work does need to be there. But what's cool is that you can do it in bite-sized chunks. It doesn't need to be hours a day. You can do stuff for minutes a day that over time, if you're consistent, can build into something really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And my background is I studied Chinese medicine. And when people hear that, they're like, well, how does Chinese medicine and endurance athletics and all this stuff, kind of what's the central theme? And most people don't understand that in Chinese medicine, we learn about connective tissue planes in Chinese medicine, we call them meridians, and they relate to organ systems and about balancing the body. Yeah. But these meridians, they're the fascia. They are the connective tissue. You can dissect right along them, and if you really start looking at the body through the functional layers of the body versus just origin and insertion anatomy, it's like a totally different, framework of how the body finds balance. And the importance of all of this is really, I said the key is relaxation, right? And we have this very, very basic system that controls all of our experiences in the body. And it's our autonomic nervous system, which has an on switch and an off switch. And our ability to have the on switch on when we need to perform and have the off switch off when we need to rest and digest is critical to being able to, continue to progress as an athlete. And not just an athlete, right? As a performer professionally, as a performer as a parent or a spouse. I mean, these are all endurance events. If anybody has a kid, they know that parenting is an endurance. Is it? Activity, But how we regulate that stress response is everything, man. If we're in a high demand situation and we can't get our bodies to react with a high stress response, we're not going to perform. And if we're in a low demand situation and we stay in a high stress response, we're going to burn out. And so regulating that autonomic nervous system, that's the key. And when we're in a stress response, the connective tissue actually stiffens to be able to prepare to run or to lift something heavy. And that's a good thing, right? That tightness allows us to improve our mechanics and to, be able to perform explosive activities or be able to take advantage of efficiencies with endurance athletics. And I can go more into that in a moment. But when we are, needing to relax, if we're not softening, and we're not getting good lymphatic drainage, and we're not getting good circulation, and we're not maximizing our digestion and absorption and getting good quality sleep, we just can't repair tissue. And that's going to lead to inflammation, and it's going to lead to overuse injuries. So, it's formulaic. We need to learn how to turn it on when we need to perform. We need to turn it off when we need to recover, and that's the name of the game.
Well, without question, there's so much more that goes into it. You look at a high level or an elite athlete, how much goes into the product that you see on the field of play, whatever the sport is, right?
Yeah.
Whatever the event or the activity is. There's so much behind the scenes happening there that we have absolutely most people, comprehension of what it took to get the person to that point. Sleep, massage, mobility work, strength training, nutrition, meditation, breathing exercise. It can go on and on and on, right? With everything it took. And then people are just blown away by what we see for that 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hours of the performance. But there's so much behind the scenes work. It's like the overnight 10-year success story, right?
Right.
It's like somebody finally breaks through and has ultimate success at something, and then we say, wow, they came from out of nowhere. But it took 10 years for that to happen.
Yeah, totally. And I everything that you just said, I think, is 100% true, especially when you're talking about people that are performing at an elite level. Right. To do things that are hard by nature and then be really, really good at them and competitive, it takes a lot more effort and a lot more recovery. The biggest example of this is like college middle distance runners. Right. They have to push the threshold, so consistently to gain like the slightest mechanical advantage. Right. But they're constantly at risk of injury. And you see such high levels of injury amongst, college runners and young college athletes because they're constantly pushing the envelope to be competitive. And that is very true to compete at an elite level. You had mentioned in our brief conversation before the podcast that a lot of your listener base, are people that are starting off and maybe aren't all at that high elite level, but are movers who are looking to stay movers and are looking to be able to enjoy continuing to not even necessarily compete, but just work out and not have it, damage them, but have it, help, be a productive, experience. And it's pretty simple when I started off by saying, I've never won a race, right? But I've competed in a ton of them and I've completed most of them, right? And I haven't put in a ton of hours, to do this stuff, right? But what I've done is I've adapted slowly over time, which is different. I'm not putting in, 100-mile weeks, right? I'm doing maybe sometimes when I'm getting up in volume, maybe it's only one run a week, right? But then I'm realizing that I have a lot of strength training to do to make sure that my hips are strong so that my mechanics are good. And I have a lot of time spent on the foam roller and doing soft tissue maintenance. And guess what? I have to sleep a little bit more on the weekends so that I can recover so that my body can regenerate. And then the next time I'm ready for that effort, it's a positive effort versus, taken away from me, So it's a whole formula.
No doubt. It's kind of thinking about the like a high-end sports car or something, like a Ferrari or whatever. And it's like just getting sure all the levels, the fluid levels are where they're at, and tweaking this and tightening that, and making this right and doing that, and you're going to get the most out of that car when you're ready to use it. It's ready to be used and go all in, and you can really push it to its end limits, but doesn't mean you have to do that on a regular.
Absolutely.
It's kind of like really grooming it and taking good care of it in between.
And I've thought of myself more as like an old pickup truck, right, with like a lot of duct tape and zip tie. that subtle balance is like making sure something doesn't wiggle too much, and you have it tightened up with the zip tie. You've got plenty of duct tape around that hose, and but it's all a balancing act, right? And whether it's high performance, and it's interesting because I've worked with a lot of spinal injury patients over the years, and a lot of people come to me with pain. right? Their entry point of I need help is I'm hurting and I can't perform daily activities. And the process of getting somebody out of pain is very similar to getting somebody to perform at a high level. It's a balancing act. And a lot of what I think has made us clinically successful in our practice is never once have I set a goal of getting somebody out of pain. That's never once been my goal. My goal is, what's your performance goal if you didn't have pain? Right? What would you do differently if this pain weren't there? Let's focus on that.
Yeah.
Right? So when somebody's like, well, I've always wanted to run a marathon, but I can't do it because of this back pain. Don't worry about the back pain. Yeah. Let's start focusing on what it would take for you to run the marathon. Man, the back pain is such a blip in the radar that goes away in the process of them reaching towards an active goal. But if you stop at the pain, right, if that's your goal, it's like it seems insurmountable, for people to be able to beat it, And it's like, but if you focus on the goal, what would you do with the opportunity of a functioning body? And let's focus on that. You start doing all the right things that are going to get rid of the pain, And it's amazing.
Yeah, it's a total mind shift.
Total mind shift, man.
It's just amazing. A mindset shift. It's just a perspective thing, because we get so stuck and focused on the negatives of life, don't we? And we zero in there when all this goodness is around us we're blind to it.
You got it. And it's amazing, man. I've always been a sucker for the underdogs. I love triumph, And when you see somebody who didn't even believe in themselves that they could function normally, let alone accomplish, a major active goal, that's why I get up in the morning. That's what makes me come into the office every day and put my best foot forward, is that stuff is achievable, right? The body is amazingly capable of regenerating and of self-regulating given the right set of circumstances. And again, I'm going to say it a few times throughout the interview. The missing piece is relaxation.
And we're also caught up in our lives, aren't we? The stress, the anxiety, the busyness, the speed of, everything is rush, rush, rush. Can't get to this fast enough. Wish there were more hours in the day, more days in the week. I got so much to do, no time to get it done, right? But yet the key to all of it is relax, breathe.
Relax.
Find some mental clarity,
Yeah, man. A lot of people think, oh, I should meditate, right? But there's like just one more thing that they don't have time to do, So then it stresses them out because I don't have time to do that, right? But we're not suggesting that people, have to spend an hour, sitting on a cushion with, incense lit and, and doing some sort of chant. Like the relaxation comes in a moment's time. And a lot of it is about recognizing that we're in a stress response and recentering, right? And you think about, an NCAA championship, right? We're in March now, things are heating up, right? When you're sitting at the free throw line with 2 seconds left on the game clock, what are you going to do? You're not going to go sit at half court and meditate. Right? You're going to take a deep breath, you're going to center yourself, and you're going to take the game-winning shot. And that's an appropriate skill when you're in a high-demand situation. And, whether you're trying to qualify for the Boston Marathon or you're an Olympic athlete, you're constantly recentering yourself and relaxing in multiple moments throughout high performance. I mean, you said you did a lot of weight training and stuff like that. I mean, right before you're able to successfully do a big deadlift, you find stillness, you center yourself, and you relax, and then you execute, right? And that's a skill. Yeah? You don't just have that. You learn that, right? And you practice that. Right. And the better you get at it, the more focused you can, be with your energy to achieve an explosive movement. Right. And then you reiterate those skills by taking longer periods of time to relax when you're not in that high demand situation, and you visualize it and you try to really take deep breaths and let the bad performance go and visualize the good performance. And, these are all skills, these are all skills that we have to work on if we want to expect high performance.
Yeah, no doubt. Great. Very well said. And, I really love that you went there and that we touched on that part of getting the most out of ourselves really does come down to take a step back, focus, relax, give yourself some time, and get good at that. Get good at mentally, like, putting yourself into a different place, and then you can really kind of get the most out of yourself. Okay, you had touched on this several minutes ago. You had mentioned the word fascia.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people, they don't know what the heck that means. They really don't. Sometimes when I talk to people, I'll say it's kind of like the saran wrap of the body underneath, like the skin and the muscles, you know. Could you talk about what it is and why people should even care?
Yeah.
And the effect that has on our body to move well, or quality of movement, and how we feel?
Yeah. So I'm gonna kind of go top level here. Fascia is the largest organ in the body. It is an organ system that is a sensory organ of communication. First and foremost. So it is responsible for bidirectional signaling between the body and the central nervous system. And when we're stressed, the nervous system communicates to the fascia to stiffen. And when we're, overworked, the fascia communicates to the central nervous system in terms of what's going on in the body. So first and foremost, its role is communication in the body. Second, it surrounds all of the structures in the body. And a lot of people think of like gauze or like a mesh, right? But fascia is actually fluid. Collagen is liquid. And there's like 17 different types of collagen fibrils that change in terms of their tensile strength and their density. And depending upon how much stress an area of the body is under will determine what sort of collagen fibrils form. So fascia can be as fluid or as tense and stiff as the body needs it to be. And there are certain areas in the body, like the IT band, that is very, very dense, closely organized collagen fibrils. And man, you're going to be hard pressed to stretch that tissue with any sort of static stretching, with any sort of foam rolling. It is dense, fibrous tissue. And just because it hurts doesn't mean you're being productive when you start, rolling back and forth over it. And then you have fascia that is, I'm going to be a little gross here, but is like the consistency of snot, right? And it basically lubricates one muscle to be able to slide past its neighbor, until it doesn't, right? And if that snot starts to become thick and goopy, now all of a sudden it's sticky, and now it's, instead of allowing for movement of one muscle past its neighbor, it's preventing movement from one muscle past the neighbor. And that's what we call a focal adhesion. And when these adhesive areas form in the body, it's like, think of like wearing like a bulky sweater and then putting on a small jacket over it, right? You're not going to, your movement's going to be really restricted, right? And that the adhesive fascia is the small jacket, and the bulky sweater is our muscles that want to be able to like have room and to be able to engorge and fill with blood and swell up. And if the fascia restricts that, man, it's like movement just really suffers, and a lot of maintenance of this system is really about keeping the jacket the same size as the sweater, right? So that we have good fluidity to our movement. And if we don't, if that jacket starts getting small and you wonder, man, I used to be so flexible, I've lost so much mobility. Well, it's not necessarily in the joints or in the muscle length. It's in the connective tissue shrinking down, and that'll cause stiffness and really make people lose mobility with age.
Oh, without question, for sure. And I go right to Tommy Boy with fat guy in a little coat, right?
Yeah, that's the image. That's the takeaway.
That's the big takeaway, right? I mean, I might have to name the episode that.
Well, exactly. And some of us, man, we that coat. That coat used to be ours, and so it's like like you use the analogy of like the wedding suit, like the jacket doesn't fit so well anymore, right? Well, a lot of it that process happens internally, right? It's like there's a term that really, if you said how come people lose mobility with age, I can boil it down to one term: viscoelasticity. Okay. Viscoelasticity is the ability for connective tissue to deform and return back to its original shape. Okay. It's springiness in tissue. If I hold my hand against my chest and I thump my finger against my chest, it springs back with a lot of power. That spring is called elastic recoil. And that elastic recoil is the ability for tissue to stretch and return. And if you have a bunch of restrictions, you lose that springiness in tissue. And then, man, mobility starts going away, your speed starts to decline. That elastic recoil is like the name of the game when it comes to running and jumping and being able to throw hard and all of that. It's, we load tissue and then we uncoil it. And that's, there's a lot of passive energy there that's available to us if our connective tissue is in a healthy state. But man, when it starts to get, stuck together and loses that elasticity, you just see a decline in performance across the board.
Would you say the two best ways to then take care of your fascia and get the most out of your body would be, one, how you're moving, right? The quality of your movement and activity. And number two, some type of manipulation of some kind, whether it's manual with like a therapist of some kind or tools that you can use. Could you just kind of elaborate there a little?
Yeah. So again, I'm going to go back to the number one factor is relaxation. Okay, down-regulating our central nervous system. So let me just tell a real quick story to illustrate this. I have there's a local dance company in town here, and they sent over this young male ballet dancer because this kid just had plateaued in terms of his flexibility. And they're like, it doesn't matter what they do. They were putting this kid on the rack and they were sitting on his back and they were just, no matter what we do, this kid just won't stretch out, And so I took one look at this kid and I'm like, man, his nervous system is like wound up, he's stressed out, and even like taking the ankle and going into plantar and dorsiflexion, it would just jump and ratchet, and so I was like, he doesn't, his joint range of motion was great. It was his neural tone was through the roof. And so all I did is taught him some breathing exercises and how to down-regulate his nervous system. We got his nervous system to come down, and immediately his range of motion was there. He broke through the plateau in like 20 minutes. Okay, because we downregulated his nervous system. So you have to be able to have the nervous system downregulated. Otherwise, you will maintain the stiffness in that tissue. Once you downregulate the nervous system, there's all kinds of tools for helping break apart and reorganize the connective tissue. Now, I'm a little bit picky about some of the strategies. There's this kind of idea of like fascia blasting, right? Like tear it apart, and I'm like, why? Like, this is stuff that people have developed, over time to develop mechanical advantage. You don't want to blast anything, right? What you want to do is you want to organize it. So if I handed you a hairbrush and told you to organize somebody's hair, you're not going to like blast their hair with the brush, and start twanging back and forth. You're going to say which direction do we want this to go, and you're going to organize the hair in the direction of style, right? And so it's the same thing. What do you want the fascia to do? Okay, well then organize it that way, right? So pin and strip or pin and active range of motion are the name of the game. You have to find the restriction, and then you have to go through range of motion to restore that tissue back to a functional plane where it's going to be help you gain an advantage versus restrict the motion in that plane. But just breaking it up and busting it apart and all of that, if you don't organize it, it's all for naught. You're just going to inflame it.
So is there something to be said then for the need for some people to seek, some type of deep massage therapy sessions or things like that when they're trying to maximize their physical ability or, to help their muscles, their muscle health? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can only.
And it is obviously also a form of relaxation, right? Is
Totally.
massage.
It's the whole picture, right? It's taking time for yourself to relax. It's it's the surrender to letting somebody else, kind of into those deeper structures of the body. And it's easier to focus on your breath and relaxation when it's somebody else's elbow. It's kind of hard to put your own elbow into your glute and relax at the same time, right?
Right.
I haven't figured that one out yet.
The contortionist approach.
Exactly. Let's again put it in like big boxes. You have to have relative posture and symmetry. Okay. And we're of the pelvis school of thought and the fascia school of thought. If your pelvis is out of alignment, you are going to animate the spine. And I don't care who you are and what you do, you want your eyes and ears to be level. So you're going to compensate to achieve that. And where gross inefficiencies come in is if you start using your big muscles, your prime movers, to take on a postural role. You're going to lose the battle 100% of the time. It's metabolically grossly inefficient. So part of it is finding good posture. Okay, good posture and relative symmetry, right? Where your pelvis is neutral and your spine is straight, and you don't have internal rotation to your shoulders, and you don't have external rotation to your hips, and you don't have what we call adhesive patterns that form on the extremities. So getting your body into neutral is very important. And oftentimes, like I said, I've been doing this for 27 years, man. It's really hard for me to self-assess, right? As far as where my body's out of alignment. And so just having a second set of eyes to be able to measure asymmetries in the body and give feedback, it's oftentimes critical to be able to recognize where we're stuck and where we're out of alignment or where we're restricted and adhesive, and then point out to us, yes, like we can get some good work done on the table while somebody's here, but it's all the work that they do between visits that make the difference. And that's really, we've worked really hard to try to empower our patients with those resources and those tools, and we were talking earlier, that's the big project that we're working on right now is, we've launched this online platform for that's patient facing, where people can have access to those tools of how to downregulate your nervous system, how to properly use a foam roller, how to use, a dowel or a rod for, aided mobility and stuff like that, because there's all these tools out there, man, but people don't really know how to use them,
No. Right. And there's also, obviously, there's a lot of confusion out there and things that, maybe aren't doing things justice in terms of how they can be used properly, because just about anybody can put out a YouTube video or, we have obviously a really big YouTube presence here at Critical Bench, and we've made a lot of content over the years, certainly some stuff that's, maybe right on, and then some stuff that maybe could use a little bit of refinement, a little bit of alignment. Yeah. But, it's, there's so much. It's information overload, right? For people, they don't know where to go.
Well, and people don't know how to necessarily search either. Like the percussive massage tools have become really popular. Like the the Theraguns and the Hypervolts and all that. But a lot of people, here's another example, like they hurt on the top of their shoulders, right? And their upper traps, from head being forward and from internal rotation of the shoulders. So naturally, that's where they want to go with the percussive massage tool and just beat the snot out of their traps, right? Well, guess what? Those traps are overworked, overstretched muscles. Okay, where is the short, tight muscle that's putting the load on the trap? Well, for most people, it's down underneath the armpit, right? Between the shoulder blade and the ribs, where two muscles meet, the serratus anterior and the subscapularis muscle. And what they should be doing is like a wall stretch and freeing up underneath the arm to get those shoulders back and get that head back. Now, all of a sudden, you take the pressure off the traps. Right? But people they feel pain, and then so they attack it with all these tools versus really learning, what's actually going to take the pressure off of this loaded area. And that's a lot of what, we try to point people towards is the education of understanding, how the body works as a complete system, that you're not just a series of parts, and how to organize that system with some, philosophy of intelligence.
That's right. The body is a chain from top to bottom. And just because you're feeling something in this one link doesn't mean that that's the one you focus on, right?
Yeah,
there could be 2 or 3 other areas that if you really develop and put the time in, that'll, your back pain stemming from these other 3 areas,
right.
and then resulting in back pain.
Yeah, we say all the time, people come in with headaches, and we solve problems in the feet. And people come in with foot pain, and we solve problems with head forward posture and internal rotation of the shoulders. It's a lot of times, the solution is nowhere near, where the breakdown in the system is. And that's kind of the name of the game, right? Is to be able to look at the body as one cohesive unit, to be able to look at it as a system of intelligence, and given the right set of circumstances, the body has the ability to heal, to regenerate, and to perform. And that's the name of the game.
Absolutely, love it. Because you in your work, you do some biohack type stuff, right? There's, obviously it's a real kind of glam word, or whatever you want to call it, trending word, or, it's been around now for years. But and I just want to go in just superficial level here, what are some of the more peculiar biohacking things that you've either done personally or know of for like an endurance athlete, or just for anybody, for general health? You can go in any direction with this, but I'm always intrigued by maybe some weird method that seems so bizarre, but it's effective.
Yeah. So this is, I'm saying this lightly, because it's kind of funny, but people used to ask me, how do you train for these endurance events? And I said, it's easy, man. You run hungover. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, you want to lay down, you want to stop, you feel terrible, and I was like, if you get used to that feeling, right, the race day becomes easy, It becomes easy because you got a good night's sleep, you had water, right? Yeah, so that's obviously I'm kidding, but the other thing that honestly I've coached a bunch of athletes through is what I call time on your feet. Okay, and you don't have to be running, you don't have to be lifting anything, but if you want to do an endurance event, you're going to be on your feet for a long time, right? And throughout your workday, I don't care if you're a teacher or, you're working behind a desk, just be on your feet as much as possible. The more that you stand versus sit, all of that is weight bearing. Yeah. All of that is teaching your body to search for efficiencies. It's training your cardiovascular system to, pump fluids and blood against gravity. And you will adapt and train your body amazingly well if you simply are on your feet for the majority of the time. Right. And if you want to be able to do a 12-hour event, you better be really, really comfortable being on your feet for 12 straight hours, and that doesn't require a bunch of time away from the rest of your life. You want to watch a movie, stand up, watch a movie standing up. But probably the biggest and simplest biohack for endurance is time on your feet.
Wow. And that seems so simple, right? Yeah. But yet makes so much sense when you say it. Because, and I just go back to, I've done a lot of adventure races and stuff in my past. It's been a while, but races where you would do like it'd be kind of like a triathlon experience, but it was like usually something like the third thing was something different. So it would be like sea kayak with running and biking. Yeah. And you had to like carry your bike through water. So, really like eco outdoor type stuff. But I did one thing that was an all day, it was a 12-hour team biking event where you had to do as many laps on the course as possible with like your team. Mm-hmm. So it was like one guy would go out, it was a 9-mile course. So you go out, ride it as fast as you can, and then go to your partner, and then your partner would go, and it was a team. And so we started, in the morning. What I remember the most is I did 3 full things. So I did 27 miles of trail riding. My legs could handle it. My butt from sitting on the seat.
Yeah, the worst.
Right? was, on the, mountain bike is not like road riding. It's a little bit more aggressive. You're up and you're down and you're pounding and you're getting beat up and sideways and stuff. My butt, I could not walk right for days because my butt was so painful. But what I should have done is had my butt on the seat more leading up to it.
Yep. And when I've done these Ironmans, powering the bike is not the issue. It's being on the bike for that long. It's horribly uncomfortable, Right. And so there's one way there's one way to get good at it, right? And it's being on the bike more. But what that means is doing doing rides where you're on the bike, but you're exerting minimally, right? So, do a ride where you're letting yourself coast a lot. Do a ride where you're pedaling with very light resistance. Just get used to being on the damn bike with your butt in the saddle, right? Because that's a lot of the adaptation that has to happen, And that goes back to what are you training? Agreed. You're training the connective tissue is what you're training, right? And connective tissue trains through adaptation. And adaptation comes from mechanical stress and repair. Mechanical stress and repair. And there's no way to
And this takes
time.
And it takes time.
Yeah.
It takes time. It just and that's where people, when they try to fast forward their results, right? The muscles can kind of get stronger pretty fast, not the connective tissue.
That's right.
That takes a little bit longer.
It takes a little bit longer. And that's most of the injuries that you see when people try to ramp up mileage too fast or they've changed sports. You see it all the time with high school athletes where they change to a new sport, right? So, they were all trained up for a cross-country season, but now they're on the court playing basketball and they run into problems, right? And it's that change of field, it's the change of shoes. It's, they're super fit and they can go all day, but all that means is that they can put more mechanical stress on the soft tissue because they have the fitness to do it, but they don't have the adaptation yet. Throwing sports, all this stuff. It takes time to adapt the tissue to prevent against injury.
Yeah, no doubt. Oh, it's great. I love that stuff. I'm learning a lot today. I hope the listeners are as well. This is right in my wheelhouse. It's stuff I love to talk about and to learn from experts like Doug, who've been doing this for almost 3 decades. This is a topic I just want to close with as we kind of wrap things up. But this is, again, another thing I'm always fascinated by, and I'd love you just to kind of talk about it a little bit, is the biological age of a person versus their actual age, and just, what that looks like, and how a 60-year-old could really be kind of like biologically more like a 40-year-old, and then reverse. A 40-year-old could really, kind of biologically be 60 years old by their lifestyle and the way they kind of take care of themselves.
Yeah. Well, again, the term that I used is viscoelasticity. Right. And that ultimately, is basically dependent on a number of factors. One is the amount of mechanical stress that you've put your body under, and with how much rest you've given it and how much repair you've allowed for it. So you take somebody that's maybe, in their late 20s, but they've been working construction and, long hours with very little maintenance to their soft tissue or to their body. Biologically, they might be in their mid 40s in terms of the joint mobility and starting to see, early degenerative, discs in their spine. They might already be, clamping down on some of the joint spaces, and depending on their diet and everything else, they might be developing, sclerosis or plaque buildup or, calcification of arteries and things like that. All of that is viscoelasticity. It's the pliability and the suppleness of tissues. And hydration plays a huge role in that, right? So people that are, that are prematurely aging, oftentimes it's just that they're simply drying out, right? They're drying tissues, and you can see it in terms of the turgor of the skin. You can see it in terms of, how their blood flow is through the body. You can see it in terms of digestive health. You can see it in terms of energy levels and hair and nails, all of it, right? But the important thing there to understand is that hydration is a lot more than drinking water. Hydration is also about proper fats in your diet, You would never put water in the engine of your car, right? There's not enough viscosity to protect against, the amount of heat and friction. You need something with more lubrication. You need, a higher viscous fluid like oil. And so, healthy fats are really important, and a lot of people eat bad fats and not any good healthy fats. And that will speed up the biological age awfully quick, but if you look at cultures that have a lot of healthy fat in their diet, fish oils and avocados and a lot of nuts and seeds and things like that, a lot of these people beat the biological age, where they might be in their 70s, but, their biological age might be in their 50s, because they've maintained that oil and that hydration, in their diet, culturally. So.
Yeah, no doubt. It is so much of a cultural thing, isn't it? And I think a lot of times in some reading that I've done or video content that I've watched, the Mediterranean diet gets a lot of support, because of that more high healthy fat intake. Right. Good amount of protein with not so much of an emphasis on carbohydrates, or at least the carbs are coming from more natural sourcing, and whereas the American diet for so long has been like, it's all about breads and grains and pastas and rices. And it's like, no, it's really not. That should be that's the little piece now. It's a total flip, right?
Just tie it back to, because aging in general is not that different than what we have to do to be good at endurance athletics as well. Part of it is being able to metabolize good stuff, right? And if you're just, feeding your body sugars, you're going to have a glycemic index that's going up and down, and you're not going to have sustained energy, right? And you're going to, burn glycogen stores, and that's all, that's what I call twiggy fires, right? That's like you can start it real easy, but it's going to burn out and not produce much heat. When you learn to become an efficient fat burner, that's like putting a nice log on the fire, right? It's going to keep you warm for a good long time, a nice slow burn. And, a lot of the adaptation is also, becoming an efficient fat burner. And efficient fat burner, you need oxygen, which means that you can't be, anaerobic all the time. You have to, train at lower heart rate zones and be able to do a lot of nice relaxed breathing, going back to that relaxation and breath. And if you do that, you can get your body trained up to be an efficient fat burner, man. And even a skinny guy or skinny woman, they've got plenty of fat to go for like days if they're burning it. And so a lot of that plays in, to how we age and to how we perform.
Without question. Love it. So good. We just recently released a few, an episode actually that was broken up into 2 parts because of the length and the amount of great content. It was talking about, ketones and ketosis and obviously, the how we can tap into a great fuel source when we know how to eat the right fats,
Absolutely.
And our body able to switch back and forth between those fuel sources efficiently, and so anyway, we don't have to go down that road because obviously that could be a whole nother full hour of conversation there. Easy. But I appreciate the insight there because there is so much goodness there, and I just love reassuring our listenership that we are in so much control of our health and our wellness, and it doesn't have to be super complicated or complex either. It can come down to just some smart food choices on a regular basis every day, piled on top of each other, where we're getting a little bit more sleep, we're drinking a little bit more water, we're eating a little bit more of our healthy fats, staying away from our fried fats, right? And we're just consistent. And it's so hard for people to be consistent, but that really kind of that's the key. When you latch on to some good habits and some good, long-term rituals that you can continue to stay disciplined in, that's what helps you attain, ultimate health.
Well, it's just like saving, man. It's like you're saving little by little, right? And people think, oh, I don't make enough money to save. Well, are you kidding me? You better start saving if you don't make a lot of money, right? And it's like our health is the exact same, right? It's like if we're a little vulnerable, well, we better start, taking small actions to bank it a little bit, and it makes a huge difference over time. It really does.
No, it totally does. And, on your website, in just a moment here, I'll have you share where some of our listeners can go for more of your great information and your platforms. But, you talk about aging gracefully. And a lot of the terminology that I've used in recent content and part of our balance program that released last year that's doing quite well, I talk about the idea of compressed morbidity in our lives. And when people hear that, they're like, what are you talking about? What's that mean? What are you driving at? And I just love this because for me, this is kind of like the goal for me when it comes to my longevity in life is compressed morbidity is squeezing down the diseased time in our lives. And eventually all of us are going to die, right? But it's what does that look like, right? What do those final years look like? Are we living in a diseased state for a 10-year period where we're unable to physically perform or be independent? Or are we 88 years old and we're still in really good health and we're out taking a walk in the woods and we just have a heart attack and have our last breath, but we went out feeling good and strong.
Yeah, right up to the last moment.
Could you just kind of talk about that for just a moment?
Well, yeah, I think, we want to spend as much of our life healthy and enjoying, activity and time with family and, hopefully, grandkids and, things like that and less time in the hospital and in receiving invasive treatments and all of that. I mean, the goal is to minimize the amount of bad feeling times and increase the amount of good feeling. And unfortunately, we see trends with obesity and diabetes and with, a lot of the metabolic syndromes that come from chronic stress, adrenal exhaustion and thyroid problems and all of this as people spending the bulk of their time in sick care, not feeling well, and versus, being active and healthy and vibrant and just being able to push that until the time's up, and I think that if nothing more, I would say that you're seeing a huge trend in healthcare of an aging population that wants to stay active longer, and this is a huge value proposition that, again, I could talk, for you, a whole day on this topic alone. But, our healthcare system really fails this population because if there's not something wrong with them, then it's the message is, well, you're healthy, keep doing what you're doing. But what's on the other side of that? What's on the whole wellness spectrum of how do we get healthier? Right? How do we, be proactive to, reduce that, that morbidity period, right? And that's where I think our current healthcare system, kind of fails this population. And there's a big movement for kind of the quantified self of people really wanting to understand, more about early detection and early understanding of orthopedic issues so that we can prevent the need for the joint replacement, so that we can prevent the need for the bypass surgery, right? It's like, what could we be doing so that we don't have to, go down that path? And that's really where we focus on our practice,
Yeah, I love it. It's terrific. You're obviously a wealth of knowledge in all these topics that we've covered. We've hit on a lot of different things, and I know you've just scratched the surface with some of these with your experience. People who are listening, they want to know more about you, where they can read more of what you're doing and all the great work. Can you please share some of the platforms and sites for our listeners?
For sure. And again, if you didn't catch it on the front end, our company is called Structural Elements. And, we really take, again, a kind of an engineering approach to quantifying the body and to looking for, how to stay ahead of the mechanical stress. And that's kind of really what we do is look at the body from this holistic lens. And structuralelements.com is our main site. We have 3 clinics in Maryland and in Wisconsin. But we've launched an online platform called SE Lab, and you can find SE Lab at lab.structuralelements.com. And Lab stands for Learn and Apply Balance. And these are tools. I said, when you're talking about regulating your stress response and taking care of the connective tissue and being proactive in terms of healthy diet and everything else. These are learned tools, and SE Lab focuses on giving people access to those tools. There's one little gift to the world that we have on that site, which is called the traction exercise. This takes 3 minutes a day. It takes no special equipment. You literally lay flat on your back in a neutral spinal alignment, and you do deep belly breathing for 3 minutes. So there's a video on the site that's outside of the paywall. If you go to lab.structuralelements.com, click on the traction exercise up there, and it'll walk you through it. Again, 3 minutes a day. It'll change your life, and it really teaches you how to downregulate that nervous system, and it'll improve sleep. It'll improve recovery. It'll improve energy. It'll help you digest better. I mean, it's amazing how powerful it is if we learn to find that off switch. And so that's my gift to all the listeners and the gift to the world is the traction exercise. Do it, and it'll change your life in a matter of a couple weeks.
I love it. I'll make sure that I do it myself. It's funny because I'll talk about the importance of some of these things, but sometimes I'm not always, my best pupil, let's say. Sure. I know the value that is there, and then it just comes down to putting in the work and being consistent with it. But we all have 3 minutes to lay flat and just breathe, right?
You most certainly do, right? And even if it's 3 minutes less of sleep or 3 minutes less of working out, give yourself that 3 minutes a day. If you prioritize it, I'm telling you, for my 27 years of working with people, I've seen miraculous things happen when people are consistent with simply laying flat on their back for 3 minutes a day and connecting to their breath. It's life changing.
Without question. And it's that ripple effect, right? It's you do one little thing and it's the pebble in the pond, and then those ripples just keep going out. And that's what it does. It ripples out into all these different areas of your life. So, man, it's been really an absolute pleasure, Doug. I sincerely mean that. Really enjoyed talking with you today, learning from you. Just absolutely fantastic. To our listeners, thanks again. I told you were in for a real treat. Went into a lot of different areas, and it could have kept going. But maybe in the future we'll have to have Doug back on where we can dive a little deeper into some of the other things that he is doing in his work, or a particular topic where we can just drill down a little bit deeper. But it's been so much fun. Thank you for listening. Please share this episode with a friend or family member, anybody who could benefit from some of the great information in today's conversation. Don't forget to hit that 5 stars. Leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening. We greatly appreciate it. And next week we'll be back as always on Wednesday with another episode here on Strong by Design. God bless you. Thank you so much for listening to the Strong by Design podcast. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe so that more people can find out about our show. Plus, you don't want to miss any future episodes with the amazing guests and topics we have lined up for you.